My parents forgot my birthday for 10 years, then demanded I buy them a car. I'm 30M, and I'm living the life I built from scratch. I have a great job, a beautiful home, and more financial security than I ever thought possible. But none of this came easy for me. Let me bring you up to speed. There are some things in life that are easy to forget. A name of an old classmate. A password you never wrote down. That one errand you swore you'd do, but never got around to. And then there are things you don't forget. Your first crush. The way the air smelled on the last day of summer break. The sound of your childhood best friend's laugh. Your own birthday. Or at least, most people don't forget it. I say most people because my parents did. Not once. Not twice. Not on a particularly stressful year where things got busy. But for 10 years straight. And before you say, well, maybe they were just forgetful, let me be clear, they remember my sister's birthday just fine. Sarah, the youngest and the golden child, never had to remind anyone about her birthday. The whole house would transform into a celebration of her existence weeks in advance. It was like the Super Bowl, Christmas, and the Met Gala all rolled into one event. When she turned 5, there was a princess-themed birthday party with a real pony in the backyard. The house was covered in pink and gold streamers, and every kid from the neighborhood was there. A magician, a bounce house, a cake so big it could have been mistaken for a wedding centerpiece. When she turned 10, she got a huge party at a rented venue with a professional party planner. There was a DJ, a themed photo booth, and a cake so elaborate it looked like it belonged on a reality show. By the time she turned 16, my parents really outdid themselves. A brand new iPhone, designer clothes, a huge catered party with professional photographers, and a $10,000 budget. It was all over social media. She even got a professional hair and makeup session before the party, as if she were going to the Oscars. Meanwhile, my birthdays barely even existed. No cake, no gifts, no texts, no acknowledgement of any kind. I used to think, when I was younger, that maybe it was just bad timing. That maybe my birthday was just too close to Sarah's, and they got too busy planning hers. But I quickly realized the truth. They weren't forgetting my birthday. They were ignoring it. When I was 8, I still had hope. I remember sitting on the stairs, watching my parents carry a giant birthday cake into the dining room, decorated with pink frosting and little tiaras. There were balloons, streamers, and the whole house looked magical. It was the most exciting thing I had ever seen. I ran up to my mom and said how amazing everything looked and how I couldn't wait for my birthday. She barely glanced at me and waved me off, too busy making sure everything was perfect for Sarah. That was the first year I didn't get a cake. At first, I thought maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe I'd been too quiet about it. Maybe they just needed a little reminder. But as the years passed, the pattern stayed the same. Sarah got everything. I got nothing. When I turned 10, I made the mistake of bringing it up. I asked if maybe this year we could do something. Maybe just a small cake or a movie night. Mom sighed, acting as if I had just asked for the moon. She said they were too busy planning Sarah's party and that I was too old for birthdays anyway. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper and muttered something about how birthdays weren't important once you grew up. And Sarah, who had perfected the art of getting everything she wanted, smirked at me and said that I just wasn't special enough. That was when it really hit me. They didn't forget. They just didn't care. At school, it was different. Every year, kids would walk around with balloons tied to their backpacks, wearing birthday pins, passing out cupcakes in class. Teachers would write their names on the board, and the whole class would sing to them. I used to sit at my desk, waiting, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone would remember mine. That maybe a friend would notice and wish me a happy birthday. But kids take their cues from the adults around them. If my own family didn't care, why would anyone else? The worst year was when I turned 18. Sarah's sweet 16 had been planned months in advance. It was all she talked about. The dress, the guest list, the gifts she wanted. I walked downstairs that morning, trying to act normal, trying to pretend I didn't feel the crushing weight of being forgotten yet again. The house was already being decorated for Sarah's party, even though her birthday wasn't for another 2 weeks. I swallowed hard and casually mentioned that it was my birthday. My mom blinked at me like I had spoken in another language. Then she laughed and said, "Oh, right. We'll celebrate later, okay?" My dad, sitting at the table, didn't even bother to look up. He just said I was an adult now and that birthdays didn't matter anymore. That night, as the music from Sarah's party planning session blasted downstairs, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own family celebrate someone else. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. One day, they would remember my birthday. And when they did, it would be unforgettable. There's something poetic about hitting rock bottom and using it as a foundation to build yourself up. That night my parents finally stopped pretending to care. I felt something shift inside me. I let go. I let go of the idea that they would ever change. I let go of the need for their approval. I let go of the years I had wasted hoping for something that was never going to happen. That night, as the music pounded through the walls and laughter filled the house, I sat alone in my room and started planning my escape. I told myself that I would have everything they denied me, and I kept my promise. When I turned 28, I had everything I wanted. I put myself through college, taking on 2 part-time jobs while studying full-time. I didn't have a luxury of family support, so I became my own support system. I didn't waste my time chasing friendships that felt one-sided or relationships that reminded me too much of my childhood, where I was always the one giving and never receiving. Instead, I focused on success. By the time I graduated, I had landed a job in a competitive field, and within a few years, I was making 6 figures. I got my own place, a house, not an apartment, not a rental, a home that belonged to me and only me. It wasn't just about having a roof over my head. It was about having control, about creating a space where I mattered, where everything inside it reflected who I had become, not who they had tried to make me believe I was. And then, finally, came my 28th birthday, the first birthday that actually felt like a birthday. For the first time in my life, I celebrated myself. I took the day off work, slept in, went to my favorite restaurant, and then I did something that felt monumental. I walked into a luxury car dealership and bought myself the kind of car I used to dream about when I was a kid. A car that screamed success. A car that said, "Look at me now." It wasn't just about the car. It was about everything it represented. For 10 years, I had poured every ounce of my energy into proving to myself that I didn't need them, that I would never again sit alone in my room, forgotten and discarded. And I had done it. I took a picture of myself standing next to my brand new car and posted it online. It was a simple post. Happy birthday to me. 10 years of hard work finally paid off. It was just a moment of celebration. Just me acknowledging myself in the way I'd always wanted my family to. But I didn't realize that post was going to change everything. A few hours later, my phone started to explode. It was the first time my family had seen me in years. And now, suddenly, I existed again. It's funny how people suddenly remember you exist when they think you have something they can take. For 10 years, my parents had forgotten my birthday so thoroughly that I might as well have been a ghost. No calls, no texts, no last-minute oops, we forgot moments. Just nothing. And yet, the very moment I posted about my success, about my new car, my hard work, my ability to build the kind of life they never thought I could, they suddenly had my number again. At first, I wasn't going to answer. When my mom's name popped up on my screen, I just stared at it. I hadn't spoken to her in years. It wasn't that I had blocked them. I never even had to. They had written me off so completely that even when I moved away, changed my number, built a life of my own, they never tried to reach me. And now, suddenly, she needed to talk? I answered just to see how ridiculous this was going to be. The second I picked up, she launched into a performance. She was over-the-top excited, practically gushing about how proud she was of me. She told me she had always known I would be successful, that she had bragged to all her friends about how well I was doing. I let her ramble, my face blank, my grip on the phone tightening. She had always known. This was the same woman who rolled her eyes every time I asked for the smallest thing growing up. The same woman who barely looked up when I reminded her it was my birthday. And now she was acting like she had been my biggest cheerleader? I let her talk, waiting for the real reason behind this sudden call. It didn't take long. After a few more minutes of fake enthusiasm, her tone shifted. She sighed dramatically and started complaining about how expensive everything had gotten, how hard life was these days. And then she dropped it. She said that she and my dad could really use a new car, something nice like the one I had just bought for myself. There was a pause. A heavy silence stretched between us as I let her sit with her own audacity. Then, finally I spoke. I asked her, "Oh, you remember I exist?" The change in her tone was immediate. She let out a nervous laugh, stumbling over her words, trying to backtrack. She said it wasn't like that. I hung up without another word. A few minutes later, my dad called. I already knew exactly how this was going to go, but I answered anyway, because I wanted to hear just how bold he was going to be. And I was right. He didn't even bother pretending to be proud of me. He went straight to guilt tripping. He told me that after everything they had done for me, the least I could do was help them out. I asked him what exactly they had done for me. Did he mean the years of neglect? The decade of forgotten birthdays? The way they had treated me like an afterthought while handing Sarah everything she wanted on a silver platter? That shut him up. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would acknowledge it. But no. Instead, he changed tactics. He told me that I had so much money now that it wouldn't even hurt me to buy them a car. That successful people help their families. It was the right thing to do. I hung up on him too. I didn't even have time to process it before my phone rang again. Sarah. I already knew this was going to be the most ridiculous one of all. And I was right. Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness, the way it always was when she was about to manipulate someone. She told me how amazing my car was, how proud she was of me. She gushed about how she had always believed in me. And then, in the most casual voice, she asked me if I could buy her a car too. She actually had the nerve to tell me that I had never gotten her a birthday present growing up, so this could make up for it. I sat there, stunned. For years, they ignored me. For years, they erased me. And now, they actually thought I owed them something? For what exactly? For treating me like I was invisible? For making sure I never felt like I mattered? I felt something inside me snap. I told her no. Not a long explanation. Not an argument. Just no. She got pissed immediately, her voice shifting from fake sweetness to pure entitlement. She whined that it wasn't fair, that I was being selfish. I hung up and blocked her. I thought that would be the end of it. I should have known better, because 2 days later, they didn't just call. They showed up at my house. I should have known the phone calls weren't the end of it. I should have known that when people like my parents don't get what they want, they push harder. But even I wasn't expecting this. 2 days after I shut them down, I was having the kind of quiet morning I had worked my whole life to earn. A cup of coffee, the sun streaming through the kitchen windows of my house, the one I bought, the one no one could take from me. For once in my life, I felt at peace. And then someone started banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging. It was the kind of knocking that demanded attention, the kind that made my gut twist, because nothing good ever comes from a sound like that. I set my coffee down and walked to the door, half expecting to see a package delivery gone wrong, or maybe a neighbor in trouble. But instead, I opened the door to find my parents and Sarah standing in my driveway. I didn't invite them. I didn't give them my address. They had hunted me down, and they were furious. The moment my mom saw me, she launched into fake tears. She told me I was being cruel, that I was turning my back on my family, that after everything they had done for me, the least I could do was buy them a car. My dad stood beside her, arms crossed, his face twisted in an expression I had seen my whole life, the I own you look. He told me that I was selfish, that I was acting like a stranger. Sarah, in full tantrum mode, stomped her foot like a child. She whined that she deserved a car, that I had always been selfish, that it wasn't fair that I had money now and wasn't sharing it. I stared at them, my mind going blank for a second, because this was insanity. They'd spent my entire life treating me like I was nothing, like I was a shadow in the background of Sarah's perfect life. And now, the same people who couldn't even be bothered to send me a text on my birthday for an entire decade were standing on my doorstep, demanding that I give them something they didn't deserve. I told them to leave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said it calm, cold, absolute. My mom's fake crying stopped immediately. Her face twisted into a snarl, and before I could react, she lunged for my car keys. She actually tried to snatch them right out of my hand. I jerked back before she could get them, my heart slamming against my ribs. She waved her arms like it was some kind of misunderstanding and told me they would just take the car for a little spin. Like I was stupid. Like I was a child who could be tricked. When I didn't budge, my dad pushed past me into my house. He had never been invited here, and yet, there he was, walking around like he owned the place, looking at my things with that same judgmental expression he had worn my entire childhood. He said it was nice. Too nice. He told me that if I could afford all this, then I could afford to buy my family a car. Sarah, not wanting to be left out, grabbed my purse off the entryway table, and started digging through it. She said I must have another credit card somewhere, like she was entitled to it, like she had the right to take whatever she wanted from me. That was it. That was my breaking point. I took a deep breath, pulled my phone out of my pocket, and started recording. I flipped the camera so it captured all of them, standing in my house, acting like they had any right to be there. And then I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I was in control. I told them, very clearly, that they were trespassing, that they had shown up uninvited, that they were demanding things from me after ignoring me for a decade. My mom gasped, her fake tears vanishing like they had never existed. She demanded that I turn off the camera. My dad, who had never looked flustered before in his life, actually took a step back. Sarah shrieked like a toddler who just had her toy taken away. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't just about making them uncomfortable. This was about making sure they never tried this again. I pulled up a text message that I had already drafted. It was addressed to my lawyer, and it said, "Restraining order request. Family attempted trespassing and harassment." I hit send. Then I looked them in the eye and told them they had 10 seconds to leave before I called the police. For the first time in my life, they were the ones scrambling. My mom let out a high-pitched sob and said I was overreacting. My dad told me I would regret this when I needed them. Sarah shrieked that I was the worst sibling in the world. I just smiled again and walked to the door. I held it open for them, because they had spent my whole life making me feel unwanted. I wanted them gone. When the door slammed shut behind them, it was like the final nail in the coffin of my childhood. They had forgotten me when I was nothing. I was making sure they would never be part of my life again. There's something about watching people lose control that makes you realize just how little power they ever had over you. For years, my parents had ruled over my life like gods, deciding what mattered and what didn't. They decided that Sarah's birthdays were worth celebrating and mine weren't. They decided that I wasn't important enough to be acknowledged, while Sarah got everything she ever wanted. They decided that I wasn't worth their time until I had something they wanted. But that day, for the first time, I got to decide, and I decided they were done. I stood by the door, arms crossed, as my mother collapsed into another fake crying fit. She gasped, wiping at her face like she was in a dramatic movie scene. But there were no actual tears, just the same manipulative act she had perfected over the years. She whined that I was being so unfair, that I was tearing the family apart. My dad, never one to grovel, went straight for anger. He stood there, arms crossed, voice sharp, telling me that I was making a mistake. That no matter how much money I had, I would still need family one day. That I would come crawling back when life got hard. And Sarah? Sarah, in all her entitled glory, was stomping her foot like a child who had just been denied a toy. She screeched that I was ruining her life. She actually had the nerve to say that she had been waiting for a new car and that I was selfish for not getting her one. I let them rant. I let them scream and whine and hurl insults at me, because I was already gone. They just didn't know it yet. My mom lunged forward again, reaching for my phone this time, trying to snatch it out of my hand like she had tried to grab my keys earlier. But I was faster, and I wasn't playing their game anymore. I took a step back, keeping the camera pointed at them, and reminded them, in the calmest voice possible, that they were being recorded. That was when my dad finally realized this wasn't going his way. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head like I was some disappointment he no longer recognized. He told me I was throwing away my family, that I was turning my back on the people who raised me. He actually believed that they had ever acted like family to me. I tilted my head and asked, "Oh, you raised me." That hit differently. For the first time that day, my dad hesitated. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, but he didn't have a comeback, because deep down, he knew the truth. They hadn't raised me. They had tolerated me. They had let me exist in their house, ignored and unwanted, while showering Sarah with everything she could ever ask for. And now, they wanted to pretend we had ever been a real family. My mom, realizing that crying wasn't working, shifted tactics. She softened her voice, tried to look sad instead of angry. She told me that they just wanted a chance to start over, that it was never their intention to hurt me, that they loved me. I stared at her for a long moment, and then I asked, "Do you remember what you were doing on my 18th birthday?" She blinked, thrown off by the question. I asked again, "Do you remember? Or how about my 16th? My 13th? My 10th?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, because she couldn't answer, because she didn't remember, because she had never cared. I let the silence hang between us, making sure she felt it. Then finally I spoke. I told them that they had never been my family, that I had spent years waiting for them to care, that I had spent countless birthdays hoping they would see me, and that they never did. I told them that they had forgotten me when I was nothing. And now I was going to make sure they knew what it felt like to be forgotten. Then I pulled up the text message to my lawyer, the one I'd already sent. Restraining order request. Family attempted trespassing and harassment. I held up my phone so they could see it. And then, in the calmest, clearest voice, I told them, leave. Now, the look on my mom's face was priceless. 1 second, she was still playing the emotional, heartbroken mother. The next, she was panicking. Because this wasn't just me being dramatic. This was real. This was legal. My dad, ever the stubborn man, didn't move right away. But when I picked up my phone, the same phone I had just used to send that text, and told him I was calling the police next, he finally took a step back. He told me I was going to regret this, that I was too emotional, that one day I would see things differently. I just smiled, because he was wrong. I had never seen things clearer. Sarah, meanwhile, was still stuck in spoiled child mode. She screamed, actually screamed. She whined that I was ruining everything, that she would never forgive me, that I was the worst sibling ever. I didn't even look at her. I just held the door open. I watched as they finally realized there was nothing left to say. And then, just as they stepped outside, I spoke one last time. I told them, oh, I forgot. You never celebrated my birthday, so I guess I never existed. I shut the door, and just like that, they were gone. For good. The moment I shut that door, I felt something I had never felt before in my entire life. Freedom. Not the kind of freedom you feel when you move out for college, but still call home every weekend. Not the kind of freedom that comes when you get your first paycheck, but still have family to fall back on if something goes wrong. No, this was absolute freedom. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't belong to them anymore. They had spent years making sure I felt like nothing, treating me like an afterthought while they paraded Sarah around like royalty. Now, they were getting a taste of their own medicine. I erased them the way they erased me. The first thing I did, blocked them. Phone, blocked. Emails, blocked. Social media, blocked. Every possible way they could reach me, gone. I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. People like my parents didn't just give up. They were too entitled, too self-absorbed to accept that someone they thought they could control had walked away for good. I waited for them to try again. For a week after they showed up at my house, I kept expecting to see them parked outside my driveway, knocking at my door, trying to force their way back into my life. But they didn't, because the restraining order went through. It wasn't just an empty threat. It wasn't just something I said to scare them off. I had filed it the second they left my property. When they tried to call me again, they got a message telling them my number was no longer reachable. When they sent emails, they got auto responses telling them their messages weren't being received. And when they tried to come back to my house, they were served with legal paperwork. They tried to fight it, of course. My mom told the courts it was a misunderstanding. She tried to paint herself as the loving, desperate mother, just trying to reconnect with her child. She told them she had made mistakes, but just wanted a second chance. I laughed when I read her response, because the court didn't just look at her words. They looked at the video I recorded. They saw my mother trying to take my keys. They saw Sarah trying to dig through my purse. They saw my father walking into my house uninvited. It took 1 week for the judge to approve my restraining order. My parents were officially banned from coming near me, my home, my workplace. They were erased. And Sarah? She went nuclear. I heard from an old friend that she had gone on a social media rampage. She posted long, ranting messages about how I had betrayed the family. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a horrible sibling. She claimed that I was a snake who only cared about money. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. Because the same girl who spent years ignoring me, mocking me, treating me like I didn't exist was now furious that I had done the same to her. The difference? I wasn't throwing a tantrum about it. I wasn't posting online, screaming for attention. I was just moving on. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had a meltdown when she realized I had blocked her. Apparently, she called our parents screaming that I was destroying her life because she had bragged to her friends that I was buying her a car. She had already told everyone she was getting a brand new luxury car. And now, she had nothing. Not a car, not a brother, not a single connection to the person she had spent years pretending didn't exist. I moved into an even bigger house across the country. The second the restraining order went through, I relocated. Not because I was scared of them, but because I wanted a fresh start. Because I deserve a life that had nothing to do with them. Because I refused to live in a place where my past could ever find me again. So, I packed up, left everything behind, and started over. New house, new city, new life. And my birthday? My birthday has never been better. Every year, I throw myself a celebration. Not because I need a party, but because I can. Because I'm not invisible anymore. Because I refuse to let their neglect define me. They forgot me when I was nothing. I make sure they know what it feels like to be truly, completely, permanently forgotten.